If I bond with you, will you let me in? Begged the alien girl, and the human said yes.
Zerath, 13, was a world no one visited on purpose. The wind here wasn't mild, it shoved. Thick gusts kicked up orange grit and carried it through the broken teeth of crumbling superstructures, screaming as it passed through old pipes and busted turbine frames. The air tasted like scorched copper and dry power cells. This wasn't a place to live. It was a place people came to leave behind. That was why Elias Thorne stayed. He had arrived nearly 7 years ago, not as a refugee, not as an outlaw, but as a man who no longer wanted to be noticed. Once, he was an exo-architectural engineer for the Eastern Rim, designing breathable domes, shielding alloys, atmospheric condensers. Then the contracts dried up. Then the silence started. Eventually, the war ate everything that wasn't useful. He hadn't picked Zerath, 13, for its beauty. He picked it because no one cared what was left. Now, he lived alone in a collapsed atmospheric spa dome, a structure built during the planet's brief colonial boom and left to rot when supply lines failed. It had hydrocoils, recycled air, and shielding strong enough to keep the worst of the wind out. Inside, Elias repaired things. Old tech, broken furniture, trashed life support systems, pieces of a civilization scattered across the wasteland. He wasn't trying to sell them. He wasn't trying to leave. Fixing was what he had left. That day, he was working northeast of the dome, salvaging a buried geothermal panel from beneath a mound of structural debris. The sand was getting worse, sky turning from orange to dull gray. Storm building. He checked the wind direction, adjusted his visor, and reached deeper into the rubble to loosen a bolt that was rusted into the frame. That's when he saw it. A movement, barely more than a twitch. He stilled, let his breathing slow. Something was behind the half-toppled wall segment. Not far. Quiet. Low to the ground. He reached for the pry tool at his hip. Didn't draw it yet. One careful step at a time, he approached the source of the motion, keeping his stance wide, ears tuned for anything mechanical or alive. Then he saw her. She wasn't hiding. She was collapsed, her back against the remains of solar condenser, her limbs half buried in the dust. Thin strips of torn fabric barely clung to her body. Violet skin, dry and cracked, stretched tight over her ribs. Her hair, long and white, matted with dirt, draped across one shoulder. Her lips were split, her chest rising in shallow, uneven breaths. Sorry. Elias felt his jaw tighten. She shouldn't have been here. The Asari were rare, their biology dependent on emotional bonding and regulated temperature. Her kind wasn't built for isolation, much less this climate. Her nervous system wouldn't last long without stabilization through skin contact or shared presence. She was bond-starved. He crouched beside her slowly. His shadow fell across her face. She stirred barely. Her fingers twitched. Her eyes opened just enough to reveal pale lavender irises, ringed faintly with dull blue. Her gaze didn't focus immediately. When it did, it fixed on his face, unmoving. She whispered, her voice dry, a scraped whisper at the back of her throat. If I bond with you, will you let me stay? Elias blinked once. Her fingers closed weakly around his wrist, not tugging, just holding. It wasn't panic that hit him. It was calculation. She was dying. He could see the physical symptoms: accelerated dehydration, shallow breathing, faint neuroglow. Her species needed others. Without another presence to balance her biofeedback loop, her body would start to shut down. She had hours, maybe less. But bringing anyone into the dome wasn't a casual thing. Elias hadn't spoken to another living being in over 2 years. He worked in silence, ate in silence, slept with silence humming through the vents. He could say no, walk away. She might not even feel it, but her hand stayed on his wrist, and she had asked. He sighed through his nose, quiet, resigned. Then he slipped one arm beneath her shoulders and one beneath her knees and lifted her with care. Her body was warm, trembling. Her head rolled gently onto his collarbone. She didn't say another word. Inside the dome, the air was dry but warmer. Salvaged heating tiles hummed under the metal flooring. The central space was wide, half living quarters, half workshop, with piles of stripped machines and restored colonial tech lining the edges. A set of solar lamps cast soft amber light over everything. Against one wall, an old reclining platform, converted into a bed, lay under a thermal blanket. Elias lowered her carefully onto it. She didn't open her eyes. He went to a nearby cabinet and retrieved a folded cotton shirt. It was faded and clean. He knelt, gently draped it over her, and turned to adjust the thermal coils beneath the bed, increasing the warmth. When he returned, she hadn't moved. She was sitting now, weakly, holding the shirt against her chest. She looked up at him, not in fear, not in panic, just steady. Eyes half-lidded but alert. He offered her a container. "Hydration pack," he said. Her hands were unsteady. He helped guide the nozzle to her lips. She drank, swallowed hard, then drank again. The glow under her skin, faint lines across her neck and arms, began to return. Very faint, but visible now. Still, she was shaking. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. Instead, he turned and began unpacking his salvaged equipment onto his workbench, letting her rest. He didn't ask her name, didn't tell her his. For the next 2 hours, he worked on a power regulator, carefully aligning fractured ceramic plates with a microbond torch. Behind him, she watched. He could feel her eyes on his hands. Her breathing had stabilized. The trembling slowed. Eventually, he heard fabric shift. Footsteps on the tile. She stood beside him now, oversized shirt slipping off one shoulder. Her arms were folded under her chest, body swaying slightly. "You live here alone?" she asked, voice stronger now. Still husky, still uncertain. "Yes. You fix things." Elias nodded. "That's the job." She looked at the half-repaired regulator. Her eyes followed the angle of his wrist as he rotated the ceramic under the beam. "You don't talk much," she said. "No." A pause. "I was left behind," she said quietly. Elias didn't look up. "I wasn't useful anymore," she added. "I ran out of credits. They stopped answering my signals. And after that, it gets blurry." Her voice didn't crack. She didn't cry, but Elias could hear the emptiness behind it. Not numbness, but something colder. Rejection that had calcified into detachment. He finally turned. "Name?" he asked. "Saria." "Elias." Another pause. She reached out, her fingers grazing the edge of his wrist again. Not clinging this time, just contact. He felt the heat in her palm. It lingered. "I wasn't asking for sex," she said flatly without shame. "I meant bonding. Just presence. Someone real. I know. You let me in. You needed help. You didn't have to." He didn't answer. She didn't press. Instead, she sat beside him quiet. Her shoulder brushed his. The shirt was loose, sleeves dangling past her hands. Her skin radiated soft heat. The glow beneath it pulsed, still faint but stable now. Outside, the wind raked across the dome, rattling old shutters. Inside, Elias adjusted the light, powered down the bench, and stood. "You should sleep," he said. "Here, it's warm. You'll regulate better." She hesitated, then nodded once and moved toward the recliner. The shirt shifted over her hips, loose and quiet. She curled under the blanket. Exhaled. He turned off the main light, left one glow strip on. As he walked back toward his cot on the far side of the dome, he paused. "I'll fix your comm band tomorrow," he said. Saria's voice was soft but clear. "I'm not contacting anyone." He looked over his shoulder. She met his eyes. Then she turned her head and closed them. And for the first time in years, Elias Thorne realized he didn't mind someone else being here. Not tonight. Not this one. The first thing Saria noticed when she opened her eyes was the silence. Not empty silence. A calm one. The kind that came with filtered air, insulated walls, and a steady low hum. Mechanical, constant, reliable. She wasn't used to it. She had fallen asleep, surrounded by desert wind and metal groaning under pressure. She'd expected to wake up cold again, heart racing, limbs sore from curling into herself for warmth. Instead, she was warm. She turned her head. The cot beneath her still carried Elias's scent, machine oil, dust, and something faintly metallic. She ran a hand over the blanket. It was soft, thicker than expected. The room around her came into focus. Wide, organized chaos. Spare components stacked in crates. Old terminals on a shelf, their panels open. A broken-down hydro sink rigged with new seals. And across the room, Elias was kneeling by a supply bin, checking wiring bundles. She didn't move. Not yet. She just watched him for a moment because now, under proper lighting, he looked more solid than she remembered. Not in a threatening way. His body had strength, yes, but it was the practice kind. The kind that didn't waste effort. His hands moved with efficiency, not speed. Everything he touched with purpose. It made her feel strange, like she shouldn't be there. But she was, and he had let her stay. Elias glanced back. "You're awake." She sat up slowly, hugging the blanket around her. "I thought I dreamed this place." "You didn't." Silence hung between them. She wasn't sure what to say. There were questions she didn't want to ask aloud. Why had he helped her? What did he want in return? Was she a burden now? Did he regret bringing her in? Elias didn't ask her anything. Instead, he brought her a heat pack and set it on the bed beside her. "Eat. Your metabolism's still correcting." Saria blinked. It was a simple ration block, warm through a self-heating pouch. She accepted it with quiet hands. He turned back to his workstation. She chewed slowly. The flavor was bland, earthy protein, probably based on nutrient yeast, but it steadied her. Each bite grounded her a little more. After a few minutes, she asked, "How long was I unconscious?" Elias didn't turn around. 4 hours. You stabilized during sleep. Glow returned after your first cycle. She hesitated, fingers pressing against her forearm, where the bioluminescent lines under her skin now pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. "Thank you." Still no reply. But he paused. That was enough. Saria slid off the bed. The oversized shirt hung off her frame like a curtain. She walked barefoot across the floor, stopping a few meters from where he worked. "You don't have to be alone here," she said. Elias finally looked up. She tried to read his face. "You could have turned me in, or ignored me. Why didn't you?" He straightened slowly. "I used to build places for people to feel safe in," he said. "Habit doesn't go away just because the people do." That was the first full answer he'd given her. She noticed something else. His voice wasn't cold. It was flat but not unkind, as if he had stopped expecting people to respond to kindness at all. "What happened to the people?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. Then he gestured toward the north wall of the dome. Storm took most of the settlement. The ones who didn't leave died in the collapse. The rest gave up and moved off-world. "And you stayed." "I had nowhere better to go." Saria lowered her head. That, at least, she understood. They stood in silence again. Elias returned to his work, cleaning a pulse regulator with slow, steady strokes. Saria sat cross-legged on the floor, closer now, and watched his movements. "I'm not a technician," she said, "but I can learn." "You don't need to," he said. "I want to." He glanced at her hands. Thin, still trembling faintly, but steady. "You're bond-dependent," he said. "You shouldn't be working yet." "I won't break." Elias considered that, then handed her a small metal shard and a brush tool. "Start with polishing. No pressure. Just get a feel for the surface." She accepted it carefully. Their fingers brushed. Her glow brightened. Only slightly, but he noticed. She knew he did, because his eyes lingered on the point of contact a second longer than necessary before he turned away. She focused on the shard. It was a panel plate, scorched, etched with old cereals. Her movements were clumsy at first, but she followed the lines. Her breath slowed. Her posture straightened. Her hands found a rhythm. Minutes passed. Then, a sharp buzz from outside. Elias froze. He stood up fast, crossed to the corner, and checked a proximity sensor. His eyes narrowed. He clicked a switch. The lights dimmed slightly, switching to emergency power. Saria looked up, tension flooding her spine. "What is it?" she asked. "Local drone patrol," he said. "Power spikes draw attention. I keep levels low so they pass over." "Will they come inside?" "No, but don't move." He crossed the room, pulled down a length of canvas cloth, and gestured. She moved quickly, crawling behind the curtain near the corner, his welding alcove. A few seconds later, the drone's light blinked across the window. Just once. A wide-spectrum scan. Elias stood still, not even breathing loudly. The light lingered. Then it passed. Silence again. Surya didn't speak. After a moment, he walked back over and lifted the curtain. You can come out. She stepped out slowly. Her breathing was tight. Her eyes were too wide. That was close, she said. He nodded. They don't care about us. Just power leaks. As long as we stay quiet, they won't report. Surya sat back down. Her hands were shaking again, but not from weakness this time. Is that what you live with out here? She asked. Always, he said. And you still help me. He looked at her. No reaction. No defense. Just the same calm stare. I didn't plan to be found, she said. I wasn't trying to survive anymore. You didn't die, he said. No, she admitted. You stopped me from that. She didn't thank him again. It didn't feel right. It wasn't enough. Instead, she said, I'll help you fix things. I'll learn fast. Just don't ask me to leave. Elias didn't speak for a long moment. Then he picked up the brush she had dropped and placed it gently in her hand. Start with this edge, he said. Work along the seam. You'll feel the difference. She looked up. Her eyes burned just a little, but she nodded. And for the first time since arriving, she didn't feel like something broken. She felt included. Outside, the wind picked up again. Inside the dome, two strangers worked in silence, no longer strangers. And for both of them, that was enough. The dome was quiet the next morning, but not empty. Elias was already awake, sitting on a metal stool beside the central workbench, calibrating a rusted outboard regulator. The dull click of his adjustment tool echoed gently in the background. Beside him, a thermal plate warmed 2 cups of red-boiled ration tea, one untouched. Surya stirred under the thermal blanket. She didn't open her eyes at first. Instead, she listened. The low hum of working circuits. The faint clink of tools against metal. No shouting. No doors slamming. No boots outside. The atmosphere remained still. It felt almost normal. She sat up, fingers combing her silver-white hair back behind her shoulders. Her skin had a little more color today. The glow beneath it steadier. Controlled. When she stepped barefoot across the warm floor tiles and approached the bench, Elias didn't look up. But he spoke. Tea's there. Surya picked up the second cup. Steam drifted from the surface, carrying a mild herbal scent. Recycled mint, probably synthetic. She took a sip, then leaned her hip against the edge of the workbench and watched him. Did you sleep at all? Enough. She gave him a skeptical look, but didn't push it. A minute passed. She watched him work, measured precise movements. His left hand held the housing steady while his right made the adjustments. His eyes didn't waver, but his brow creased slightly as the calibration shifted out of alignment. Surya took another sip of tea and asked quietly, How long have you really been out here? Elias paused. Set the regulator down. Since the fall. 8 years. She blinked. You were here before? He nodded. Part of the original structure crew. I was a systems engineer, domes, environmental controls, power regulation. Surya studied him again, now with context. The way his hands moved. The way he built and repaired. It wasn't scavenger skill. It was design. He'd created places like this. Probably hundreds. And now he lived in a broken one. What happened? Corporation pulled funding. Local administration collapsed. We lost long-range comms. Evac was optional. He looked at her now. Most left. Some didn't. Why didn't you? Elias met her eyes and said nothing. Surya didn't press further. The silence told her enough. But a few seconds later, he added, I built this place. Figured I'd be the last to turn the lights off. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. That answer wasn't bitter, just honest. Were you the only one who stayed? She asked. A small pause. There were others for a while. Not anymore. She didn't ask how they died. She didn't want to know. His expression said enough. Memories shelved away, not forgotten, but sealed. She took another sip of tea, then asked, more carefully, Why didn't you just leave with the last ship? Elias looked down at the open regulator in front of him. I'm good at building things. Not so good at people anymore. The simplicity of it hit harder than she expected. Surya didn't answer. She just leaned a little closer, setting her tea aside and quietly picking up a polishing cloth. Without waiting for permission, she began helping. He didn't stop her. They worked together for the next 20 minutes. It was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Their movements began syncing, passing tools back and forth without needing to ask, adjusting posture and rhythm. Finally, Surya asked, "Why are you helping me?" He didn't look up. "You needed help. I still do. That's fine. You don't ask for anything back." Elias paused again. His voice was lower when he answered. "Everyone wants something eventually. I'll let you tell me what it is when you figure it out." That shut her up, but not in a bad way. She placed the cloth down and sat fully on the bench beside him. Her tone shifted. "You never asked how I ended up here. I figured you'd tell me when you were ready." She nodded slowly, looked at her hands. "I was working planetside for an Asari trade envoy. Clerk work. We were supposed to make contacts with off-grid colonies. Nothing dangerous. But one day, the team left without me." Elias looked over. "Left you? They said I was sick. Too expensive to treat. Too fragile to take with them. They left a week's worth of hydration packs and called it compassion." She tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Turns out, Asari need more than rations to stay alive. We need presence." "Bonding," Elias said. She nodded. "It's neurological. Our systems sync with others through shared space, breath, body heat. Doesn't have to be romantic. Doesn't have to be sexual. But it has to be real." Elias nodded once, thoughtfully. "So without it, we unravel." Surya's voice went quieter. "First comes disorientation. Then low-grade fever. Skin temperature drops. Motor function slow. Then, if nothing intervenes, coma. And shut down. You were almost there. I'd stop trying to avoid it." Elias leaned back slightly on the stool, crossed his arms. "You knew you were dying, and you still asked for consent." That caught her off guard. He looked at her with a kind of frank, steady awareness. "You could have thrown yourself at anyone. But you asked. That matters." She looked away quickly, but her eyes were glowing stronger now, the faint blue pulsating under her skin like stable power. "I didn't want to be touched by someone who saw me as broken," she said quietly, "or as a body, or a burden. And now," she glanced back at him. "Now," her voice softened into something steadier. "Now I want to be near someone who doesn't see me as a commodity." Elias didn't respond. Instead, he stood, walked over to a crate, and pulled out an older portable comm unit, faded green casing, several dents. He handed it to her. "Help me fix this. It'll keep your mind busy." Surya smiled just a little. "Is it your way of saying you trust me with tools?" "It's a start." She began opening the casing, and for the next hour, the only sounds were quiet breath, small laughter, and the gentle clink of metal on metal. Neither of them noticed how close they'd gotten. Or maybe they did, and simply didn't care. Because when Surya reached out later and touched his forearm to ask how a connector should fit, Elias didn't pull away. And when she left her hand there a second longer than necessary, neither of them spoke about it. But both felt it. And that was the moment something between them shifted. Not dramatic, not loud. Just real. And once something real starts to grow in a place like Zerath 13, you don't let it go. The evening light on Zerath 13 wasn't soft. It was stripped. By the time the sun fell behind the shattered towers, everything turned rust-colored. Shadows stretched long across the inside of the dome, slicing through the cluttered workshop like dark wires. Elias had shut down the main bench hours ago. The regulator and comm unit lay half disassembled on the table, but he didn't care. Not tonight. Not after the way Surya had looked at him when she placed her hand on his arm and didn't pull back. It wasn't just contact. It was trust. Now, she sat across from him at the smaller utility table, cross-legged, sipping warm ration broth from a cup he'd reheated on the thermal coil. The oversized shirt still draped across her body, sleeves gathered in her palms. It slid off one shoulder again, but she didn't adjust it this time. She wasn't hiding anymore. He noticed. Every time she shifted, the quiet way she leaned her weight forward, the way her glowing eyes tracked his, it was intentional. Not aggressive, not seductive, just present. "I didn't think I'd get this far," she said. Elias looked up. "I thought I'd go under before anyone found me," she added. "Or worse, that someone would find me, but not see me." He let the moment hang, then said, "You're not invisible here." She nodded slowly, then tilted her head. And you? Do you ever get tired of the silence? He thought about it. I did, he said. Then I got used to it. Now, I don't know what it feels like anymore. Surya smiled faintly. You're not used to being seen either. I'm not sure I want to be, he said honestly. It comes with expectations. She leaned forward, elbows on the table now. What if I expect nothing? He stared at her, unreadable, then finally said, That's not true. Surya tilted her head, surprised. What do you mean? You expect safety, space, gentleness. That's not nothing. Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't answer. The glow beneath her skin was warm now. Not urgent, not spiking from desperation. Just steady, confident, resting. She stood up and walked to the far side of the dome, then turned and glanced over her shoulder. Will you show me how to activate the vent fan? She asked. It's getting warm in here. He stood, moved beside her, and flipped the panel open on the wall unit. His fingers moved through the dial sequence. Surya watched his hands again. You always do that, she said. Move like the machine matters. It does. It needs to function. If I treat it rough, it'll fail sooner. And you treat people the same? Elias looked at her, slower this time. When they let me. There was no mistaking the way her glow reacted. Faint streaks of gold blooming across her shoulders. She didn't ask permission this time. Her fingers slid up his forearm, slowly, and rested at the crook of his elbow. Her body came closer, chest brushing his side, legs inches from his. I'm not broken, she said softly, but I still want to be touched like I matter. He didn't answer. He didn't move. Surya leaned in, her voice warm near his ear. I've had enough silence. She reached up, slid both hands around his neck, careful, slow, deliberate. He let her. The kiss wasn't sudden. It was slow, tactile, grounded. She pressed in with her body first, then her lips, and her fingers trembled slightly at his nape. Not from fear, from relief. Elias kissed her back. His hands landed on her waist, strong, steady. Not pulling, just there. He let her set the pace. Let her decide when the kiss deepened, when her breath caught, when her lips pressed harder. He responded, not dominated. They didn't move to the bed. Not yet. Instead, they stayed there, standing in the low light near the wall, arms around each other, breathing in the quiet that no longer felt empty. When they separated, Surya didn't pull back far. Her forehead rested against his. Their breathing synced, close, calm, unhurried. Elias opened his eyes. You sure? He asked low. She nodded. Yes. He nodded once, then reached down to take her hand, not dragging, not leading, just holding. And together, they walked to the recliner. The dome's light dimmed automatically with the drop in power usage, leaving only the soft glow of Surya's skin and the red standby light of a forgotten console blinking in the corner. Outside, the wind passed gently across the dome. No alerts, no scans, no threats. Inside, two people lay side by side, not for survival, not for necessity, but because this was the first time either of them had chosen to stay, and neither one let go. Morning on Zarath. 13 came not with sunlight, but with glare. The sky outside the dome had turned a burnt yellow, a haze of irradiated dust particles hanging low in the atmosphere. It filtered through the reinforced glass panels above the dome's main chamber, casting a pale amber tint across everything inside. Surya stirred first. She lay curled beneath a thermal sheet on the main recliner, Elias's recliner now theirs, and blinked slowly, her body warm, her pulse calm. The shirt she'd once clung to now lay at the foot of the cot, forgotten. Her skin glowed faintly where it touched the cushion, soft waves of blue and gold rising and fading with her breath. She turned her head. Elias sat at the edge of the table, shirtless, rubbing a towel across his damp hair. He'd clearly showered already. There was a thin sheen of condensation near the wall vent where the portable steam unit was still cooling down. He glanced over. Didn't mean to wake you. You didn't. Her voice was quiet, but steady. I was just listening. To what? That. She gestured lazily. You. Moving. Doing things. It's strange. Elias raised a brow. Strange. She sat up, sheet draped loosely over her lap. It doesn't feel like survival. It feels normal. He didn't answer, but something softened around his jawline. He walked over, set down the towel, and sat across from her, pulling on his shirt, simple, black, thermal. Functional. Surya watched his hands as he did. Still precise. Still gentle. She asked, "Do you do this every morning?" "Work? Yes." "Bathing?" "Not always." She smiled slightly. "Maybe now you will." He allowed himself the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth. Almost a smile. She drew her knees up, crossing her arms loosely around them. "I don't know what comes next." "You don't need to. I want to stay useful." "You're not here to work." "Then what am I here for?" Elias stood again and walked toward a storage crate. Surya didn't press. She waited. When he returned, he placed something in her lap. A scanner core, half-burned, circuitry blackened on one side. "Want to help? Try cleaning this without triggering the fail-safe chip." Surya blinked down at it, then up at him. "That's not exactly easy. It's not supposed to be, but you said you wanted to learn." She smirked. "So, you going to train me now? If you're staying, you'll need to know how to maintain the systems. If I ever get sick, or if there's a breach, you'll need to act fast." Her expression shifted. Something about his tone carried weight. Not fear, but realism. She nodded once and slid off the bed. The next hour passed quietly. She sat near the bench with the scanner core disassembled, pieces lined up in a grid, while Elias worked on reinforcing a cracked ceiling vent. They didn't talk much, but their proximity, the comfort between them, made the silence feel shared instead of empty. Later, when she tapped the wrong capacitor and triggered a tiny static shock through the table, Elias was already beside her before she spoke. "You okay?" "I'm fine," she said, blinking fast. "Just a feedback pulse." It caught me off guard. He knelt down, checking her fingertips. "No burns." "I'm not glass," she murmured. "No," he agreed. "But you're still stabilizing." Then he brushed his thumb over her knuckle before standing again. That gesture lingered longer than the shock. The moment was broken by a sharp knock, not metal on metal, but something striking the outside of the dome. Surya froze. Elias turned fast, eyes narrowing. He moved toward the console beside the front airlock, an old touchpad rewired for short-range perimeter scans. He tapped it once. The display blinked. One figure. Not armed. Not armored. A scavenger, probably. Local. "Stay here," Elias said. Surya stood anyway. "Is it dangerous?" "Not yet." He walked toward the door, unhooking a matte black sidearm from the wall as he moved. Not raised. Just precaution. When the outer hatch hissed open, Surya stepped behind a pillar, just far enough to see but not be seen. The man outside looked rough. Early 50s, sun-scorched jacket, a rebreather hanging off his belt. His face was weather-beaten, eyes sharp. "Didn't think anyone still ran power in Sector 7, the man said casually. Elias didn't respond. The scavenger gestured behind him. Spotted thermal trace 2 clicks out. Was checking to see if it was some leftover tech worth pulling. "You found nothing. I'm not here to rob you. Just figured maybe we could trade." "No trade," Elias said. The man studied him for a long moment. "Was told this place was empty." "It was." The man squinted. Then his gaze shifted past Elias, toward the faint shadow movement inside. Elias stepped forward, subtly blocking the view. The scavenger caught the motion. "Not alone, huh?" Elias didn't answer. The man raised a brow. "Didn't mean anything by it. You got a dome, you got company, that's none of my business." He waited. Elias didn't move. After a few more seconds, the scavenger raised his hands. "All right, just passing through." He turned, walked back toward the dust path, boots crunching into the gravel, cloak trailing behind. Elias closed the door the second he was out of range. When he turned back, Surya was already standing by the edge of the hall. "That was too close," she said. "He wasn't looking for you. But he saw me. Maybe. Maybe not." She folded her arms, frustrated. "You said the dome was off-grid." "It is, but not invisible." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Will more come?" "Not unless he tells someone." "Will he?" Elias hesitated. "Doubt it. Too territorial. He won't risk drawing attention to a working shelter." Saria's posture eased slightly. Still, she moved closer. Her voice softened. What would you do if someone tried to take me? Elias met her eyes. I don't let go of what I keep, he said. He stepped past her, gently brushing his hand against her arm. And even though the wind picked up again outside, rattling the dome's western shield, Saria didn't feel afraid. She felt kept, not owned, not controlled, chosen. And for the first time, she realized something had changed, not just between them, but inside her. She no longer wanted to leave, even if the world came knocking again. A low vibration ran through the floor panels. It wasn't sharp, more like a hum beneath the soles, rising and fading in slow waves. Saria paused mid-step, turning toward the west wall, where one of the old insulation seams had started to shift. Elias was already there, kneeling at the base of the structure, one hand on the rusted support brace. Pressure fluctuation, he muttered. Storm front. He nodded once. Thermal inversion. It's forcing a pressure bulge under the west side. Saria didn't know all the technical terms yet, but she recognized the look on his face, focused, calculating. Not panicked. Can I help? Elias didn't answer right away. Then he stood and pointed to the tool rack. Orange case. Impact drill. Bring it. She grabbed it quickly and returned to his side. He knelt again, unscrewed a panel, and peered into the gap behind the wall. A mess of aging conduits and heat sink struts twisted like bone under skin. Saria crouched beside him, shoulder brushing his. What do you need me to do? He handed her a small floodlight. Hold this steady. Don't let it flicker. I need to reinforce the bracket before it warps. She did exactly that, kneeling beside him in silence, one hand steady on the light, the other bracing herself against the floor. The faint hum grew louder. Dust trickled from the ceiling in fine lines. The storm outside wasn't violent. Not yet, but the pressure it built could tear through a weakened seal if ignored. Elias worked fast but controlled, guiding the drill into place, anchoring the new support bolt with one hand and tightening the existing bracket with the other. Saria's hand stayed rock steady. Minutes passed like that. When he finally pulled back, he exhaled and nodded. Done, he said. She relaxed, then asked quietly, would it have collapsed? Eventually, he said, might have cracked the shielding. Forced us to seal the entire west side. We'd lose the hydrocoil intake. She processed that. We'd lose water. Elias looked at her. She met his eyes. That's not just maintenance, Elias. That's survival. He nodded. She leaned back on her heels, wiping dust from her knees. That's the first time I've done something that mattered in a long time, she said. Elias didn't say anything, not right away, but he didn't look away from her. Your presence already mattered, he said finally. Saria swallowed. The heat in her throat had nothing to do with the storm outside. Then, just as she was about to stand, Elias winced. It was quick, subtle, but visible. He reached behind his shoulder, fingers pressing just beneath the right scapula. His jaw tightened. What is it? Old injury. Scar tissue under the blade. The torque from the drill twisted something. She moved beside him in an instant. Sit down. I'm fine. You're not, she said, tone firmer now. Sit. He resisted for half a breath, then lowered himself onto a nearby crate. She pulled the shirt collar aside gently and examined the area. His skin was warm beneath her fingers, slightly flushed. The scar was faint but wide, old burn trauma, not recent. Regrowth. Partial, he muttered. Didn't take full grafts before evac. Just sealed the nerve cluster. She nodded. That's why the tension flares when you use torque. You sound like a medic. I worked with Asari field teams before trade administration, she said. I know enough. She pressed gently on the muscle line, adjusting pressure until he exhaled. Not in pain, in release. Right there, he said. I know. Saria's touch stayed clinical, controlled. But as she worked, Elias's body began to loosen, shoulder dropping slightly, head tilting forward. She moved behind him, kneeling, her hands working along the joint with slow, steady pressure. Her thumbs circled deeper, drawing the tension away from the scar. This part of you doesn't get used to being touched either, she said softly. He didn't answer, but she felt his breath change. When she finished, she pulled his shirt back into place, and sat beside him, close. "Let me carry some of this," she said. "Not just the easy parts." He looked at her, eyes steady. "You already are." Silence settled between them again, but it felt different, not quiet. Shared. Later, as the storm rolled in, they locked the dome's vents and shut the western intake line. The lights dimmed automatically, and Saria helped reassign the power flow to secondary regulators. They moved like a team now. No instructions, no hesitation. By nightfall, they sat side by side on the recliner, both barefoot, both wrapped in the same thermal sheet. The wind howled softly against the dome, not threatening, just present. Elias sipped water. Saria leaned her head on his shoulder. He looked down at her. "When this storm passes," she lifted her gaze. "There's a subgrid relay 2 clicks north. Abandoned. If we can tap it, we might be able to access old network feeds. You want to connect to the outside?" "No, but you should have the option." She stared at him for a long moment. "I don't want to leave," she said. "I'm not asking you to, but you'd let me." "Yes." Saria leaned closer. "Then I'm staying. No ceremony, no promises, just decision." And a quiet certainty that, in the middle of a broken world, 2 people had built something steady enough to stand. The storm passed overnight. By morning, only a soft rustle of wind lingered outside the dome, brushing across the shielding panels like a breath through hollow bones. The air inside was still warm, filtered quiet. Saria stood at the main console in one of Elias's old shirts, sleeves rolled past her elbows, cables spread out across the work table. Her glow was steady now, no longer pulsing from stress or starvation. She moved with intent, with familiarity. She belonged here. Across from her, Elias adjusted the calibration knobs on the spare relay booster. His right shoulder was bare. She'd cut away the seam of his shirt earlier to keep pressure off the scar tissue. He hadn't asked. She'd just done it. They worked in sync. No instructions. No glances exchanged for approval. This was just their morning now. When Saria finished crimping the final wire, she stepped back and exhaled. "Okay, that's the last junction." Elias ran a final scan. The diagnostic blinked green. No overload. Battery integrity stable. They looked at each other, both knowing what that meant. He tapped a switch. A nearby terminal flickered to life for the first time in years, its screen loading slowly. Symbols scrolled across the interface, lines of archived logs reconnecting to the local sector net. Not long range, not open to the wider colonies, but enough to show they weren't completely cut off. Elias stepped back. "It's yours. You can scan for anyone still on planet." Saria stared at the screen, but her fingers didn't move. He noticed. "You okay?" She turned slowly to face him. "I don't need to scan for them. You might want closure." "I already got it," she said. "They left me. That's all the answer I need." Elias nodded once, quiet. Then she asked, more softly, "Is there anyone you want to search for?" He didn't respond right away. "Then no." Saria waited. He looked at her and added, "I stopped hoping years ago. No family left. No friends to call." She stepped closer. "Then what kept you here?" Elias shrugged faintly. "I used to think it was the systems, the structure. I kept fixing the dome so it wouldn't fall apart. But I think I was just giving myself an excuse to stay still." He looked at her now, voice quieter. "Then you arrived, and I started working like it mattered again." Saria's glow deepened, soft blues tracing her collarbone, her wrists. "And now I'm building for someone who'll still be here in the morning." She stepped into him, then, slowly, arms wrapping around his waist, her face pressing to his chest. Elias held her without hesitation, his hands firm on her back. There was no urgency in the embrace. No hunger, just peace. Minutes passed like that. When they finally pulled apart, Saria picked up a nearby tunic. Hers now, one Elias had adjusted to fit her frame, and slipped it on over her skin. She tied the sleeves tight, pulled the collar snug. She looked not just safe, but anchored. Then she glanced over her shoulder. "Come with me," she said. Elias followed her outside. The storm had cleared the path leading north. The horizon was dust-blown and jagged, but under the morning sun, it almost looked clean. Saria led him halfway up a broken walkway near the dome's original observation deck. where she'd quietly stacked spare parts over the past few days: old turbine blades, shielding plates, heat seal glass. "What's this?" Elias asked. Saria stood beside it, arms crossed, wind brushing her hair. "I've been thinking. You built this dome to keep people safe." He nodded. "Then let's expand it." Elias blinked. She gestured around. "There's enough salvage material to clear the old hydro bay. We can open it up, create space for more systems. Maybe a second chamber, another workspace, a proper rest bay." He stared at her. "I want to stay," she said, "but I don't want to just live. I want to build something with you. From scratch." Elias's expression didn't shift much, but something in his shoulders relaxed. Something old let go. He walked up to the stack of parts, placed a hand on the top turbine blade, then looked at her. "Okay." She smiled. Not wide, just real. He added, "We'll start after lunch." That made her laugh, a soft, honest sound carried by the morning wind. They turned back together, heading toward the dome. As they reached the hatch, Saria took his hand, fingers lacing through his. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "I know." And for the first time since Sarath 13 was abandoned, since the colonies fell, since the comms went dark, since everything broke down, Elias Thorne felt whole. Not because someone had repaired him, but because he'd let someone in, and she chose to stay. The sun hung lower in the sky now, not from time passing in some symbolic way, but because Zarath 13's rotation had entered its mid-season lull. The air was dry calm. No storm warnings in the buffer grid. No scavengers on the scans. No wind rattling the dome's panels. It was just a quiet, beautiful day. Inside the dome, the light was golden, filtered through polished glass they'd cleaned together just 2 mornings ago. It cast long, warm shadows across the floor and over the tables now organized by function: repair, calibration, polishing. And just near the central column, a shared bench with 2 old cups, half full with sweetened Saria, had insisted on flavoring with crushed ration mint. She leaned against the wall near the open vent, barefoot, hair damp from a quick rinse. She wore the custom tunic Elias had reinforced with patches she picked out, purple thread on black mesh, rough style but proud. Her body glowed faintly, more controlled now, soft waves of color pulsing through her skin like a second heartbeat. She looked alive, not surviving, living. Elias crouched nearby, elbows resting on one knee, replacing a heat regulator in the west intake. His sleeves were rolled back, his shirt open at the collar, grease along his knuckles, but not fresh. He'd paused mid-task just to talk with her, like it could wait, because now it could. Saria watched him finish the last connection, her tone light. "That's the 3rd time you've realigned that same pipe. I like it centered," Elias muttered. "It's half a millimeter off." "I know." She smiled, walked over, crouched beside him, and bumped her shoulder lightly against his. "You do realize it doesn't have to be perfect anymore, right?" she said. "Nothing's trying to kill us. We have filtered air, heat, food, and exactly 0 slavers or drones looking for Asari signatures." "I don't like crooked things," he said dryly. She leaned in closer, voice quieter. "Then it's lucky you found me." That made him pause. He turned and looked at her, really looked. Her face was clean, cheeks flushed, lavender eyes bright. She had weight again, strength in her arms, a steadiness in her steps. And yet she was still close, still choosing to sit at his side. His hand rose, brushing a line of hair away from her cheek. His thumb rested lightly against her temple. "You know," he said, "if someone saw us like this, they wouldn't believe you were ever bond-starved." She leaned into his hand. "That's because I'm not anymore." The silence that followed was warm. No tension, no questions, just stillness. Later, after lunch, a shared pan-heat meal of crisped root starch and salvage protein strips. They stepped outside the dome. The sky was clear. The ridge to the west cast long shadows down the slope, but the air was mild. Saria walked beside Elias, her arm hooked gently around his, barefoot in the dust. They passed the hydroline trench they'd cleared, the outer antenna she'd helped install, the new vent tower she'd painted symbols on, not for decoration, but identity. Asari sigils merged with Elias's old crew code, now welded together on the frame. They reached the top of the slope and sat side by side on a piece of curved alloy. Below them, the dome stood solid, cleaner than it had in years. Lights working, systems balanced, solar panels aligned. "You built that," Saria said softly. "No," Elias corrected. "We did." A breeze stirred her hair. She turned to him. "Have you ever had this?" she asked. "This feeling? The knowing that someone isn't going to disappear when things get quiet?" He thought about it, then answered honestly. "No, me either." She took his hand. They stayed like that for a long while, not speaking, not needing to. Eventually, Elias broke the silence. "We still have that empty room by the old spa tiles." Saria blinked. "The one we keep walking past." "Yeah, I was thinking if we build in a second recliner, rework the water feed, maybe set up a second panel display." "For what?" she asked, smiling. "For you," he said. "Your own space. To work, rest, build what you want, without asking." Her voice dropped. "I already have that." He hesitated. She looked up at him. "You don't get it yet, do you? I don't need my own corner of this place. I just need one thing." He raised an eyebrow. "What?" Saria leaned over, kissed him once. Simple, soft, certain, and whispered, "To stay in it with you." And when they rose, hand in hand, and walked back toward the dome together, the sun dipped behind the ridge, not in mourning, but as if making space for something new. They didn't look back. They didn't have to. They had everything they needed. And for the first time in either of their lives, they weren't alone.